This week the Salvage squad are in Ironbridge. This idyllic little Shropshire town is famous as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, so you might think we were here to tackle something big and dirty. But no! We've come to the fair! To take on a steam ride that would have been the crowning glory of any fun fair at the turn of the last century. And it's not a chaeroplane, it's the king of all rides. The Gallopers! Now, you probably know them better as carousels. But in the fairground game, the rides with the prancing horses are always called Gallopers. Back in 1911, this pile of poles and wood was one such beautiful ride. But 90 years and millions of happy punters have worn it down. Like discarded toys, the thousands of parts of our ride have been mothballed for the past 20 years. Hopefully the arrival of the Salvage squad, Claire, Axel and Jerry, will change all that. We'll open up the toy box and, with a bit of luck, turn this confusion of parts into a working ride again, centrepiece to a traditional Edwardian fair. And what a magic place it is! 100-year-old fair, owned by two people in love with fairgrounds of the past, Kevin Scrivens and Simon Harris. They lived the life of an Edwardian showman right down to living in traditional wagons. For them, these rides are not historical toys, but a business that must provide them with a living. And after all, that's what the rides were built to do. It's taken them 10 years to recreate the past, and the electrically powered chaeroplane ride is their star attraction. But 100 years ago, a fair like this would have been alive with steam power. And they know that's what their fair lacks.
To own a steam-driven ride with wooden horses and wooden rounding boards, it will be almost unique, really, and something we want to do for other people as much as ourselves for visitors.
We thought it was well beyond us ever achieving to buy a set of Gallopers, but we've got this far down the line now. We've got to do the rest of the work and get it operating again.
There are quite a few sets of Gallopers around, but very few that are still driven by steam.
Built in Tewkesbury in 1911, our ride travelled the countryside for over 60 years. Powered by a steam engine mounted right in the middle of the ride, it featured 24 galloping horses and, oddly, 12 prancing cockerels. When Kevin and Simon stumbled across it in Switzerland a couple of years ago, it hadn't been on the road for 20 years. But the moment they saw it, they knew it was the ride for them.
The originality of it, it's almost exactly as it was in the 1920s. It's not been modernised to any great extent.
Sadly, there's one part that's a bit too original. Her steam engine is quite literally rotting away. A major problem for Kevin and Simon.
I'm skilled in woodwork. Kevin does the painting and the decorating of the rides, but when it comes to the steam engines, that's a little bit out of our scope. So we do need help to get the steam engine running again to operate the ride.
Because it's in a very bad way.
Yeah.
The travelling fair's been around since the Dark Ages. Moving from town to town, their chief role was as a marketplace. But the crowds meant money for entertainers, and plays and shows quickly became the hallmark of all fairs. All shows and rides that developed around the travelling fair had one thing in common. They could be thrown up and pulled down with a minimum of fuss. And when bigger rides like our Gallopers appeared, they still had to fold up and pack away. It's a fascinating world, and I bet our ride's got some amazing stories to tell. I'm going to make it my job to track them down. Hello, Claire. So this is obviously part of the ride, but what is this?
This is the centre of the ride. There's a chimney that folds up on the top, and the whole ride hangs from the top bearing. So this is the core of the ride.
Every single piece of the ride actually hangs from the steam engine's chimney. The horses, the roof, the decoration, even the floor hangs off the funnel. Without the power of steam, all this weight would never go round. And that's Simon and Kevin's problem. Their steam engine just isn't up to the job anymore. Normally, you'd expect the squad to leap in and fix the engine, but we're going to break with tradition and palm this job off to a couple of mates of Claire's up in Derbyshire. Steam boffins Jack Meeker and Ian Howard. Surprisingly, the rest of the ride's machinery is all right, but a fairground ride is as much about show as go. It's the look at the ride that draws the punters and their money in, so we'll be concentrating on the glamorous paintwork and carving. But Jerry and Axel are beginning to realise that even that's a huge challenge.
Go on, let's get these out and make a start on stripping them.
Right, yeah. Hold on a minute, Jerry.
What?
How many of these have we actually got?
12 cockerels, 24 horses.
Right, that's a lot of work, really.
Yeah.
Compared to the work we've got to do.
Well, they don't look bad. Make an executive decision. Give them a wash and polish, leave them be otherwise.
Yeah.
But even without the horses, there's a shed load of work. Luckily for us, Simon and Kevin have a fantastic shed just down the road, so that's where we'll be based. Halfway through unloading, Axel and Jerry gave me a ring, in great excitement, saying they may have found a clue to get me started on my quest. Hello, chaps.
How are you doing, mate?
Good, how's it going?
We think we've got some shape.
Check this out.
Hey, hey, hey.
How about that, lad?
Excellent.
This is the base layer of paint, so it's the first name to be put on it.
So we're thinking this could be the original owners, J. Edwards.
Every chance.
How fantastic. I wonder if any of them are still alive. What I should do is take a picture. And now, I've got something to go on. See you later. So that's the first part of my quest, to find someone who actually remembers who J. Edwards was. Meanwhile, back in the shed, the others gathered round a copy of the Boys' Book of Fairground Rides and broke it to Kevin and Simon that they won't actually be doing the horses.
We'd like to just give them a clean and a polish and put them to one side. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, they're not in such a bad condition. They're usable as they are, and they look quite smart.
I mean, I think that one of the things that hits me in the eye about the roundabout are these fantastic boards around the top, these rounding boards.
Yes. They do tend to be the focal point. They're sort of the first thing you see as glitter as it turns round, so yeah.
They've never been stripped, so in fact we think there's quite a bit of original decoration underneath that we might be able to reveal and hopefully copy.
And there are how many?
12 of them.
Okay, right.
12 seems to be a magic number.
It does, right? It's all multiples of.
12-section machine, so that
Right.
possibly be why.
Travelling rides like ours had to be put together by only 2 or 3 blokes, so they're broken into manageable sections, and ours is a 12-section ride. 12 floor pieces, 12 rounding boards, and so on. So, every job we do, we'll have to do again 11 more times.
And I'm afraid there's some mirrors to do around the centre drum. There's been some mirrored tiles put over where we believe there were cut glass mirrors.
If we can get it back to that original state, it's going to look fantastic, isn't it? All that carving, bright paintwork.
Totally.
Yeah, just as it was in its heyday, really.
Yeah, brilliant. That's what we're trying to achieve.
And running on steam.
Oh yes, brilliant.
Simon and Kevin want it finished as soon as possible. On a good day, it will earn them a reasonable living. But until the horses gallop again, it's earning nothing. And it's quite a challenge. The first task is to renovate the old rounding boards and their wooden carvings. Then, new cut glass mirrors will have to be made by hand for the centre truck. And when that's done, there's the most difficult task of all. We've got to build the Gallopers again from a jumble of bits into a working ride. For these specialist jobs, Kevin and Simon will be with us all the way. But there's one task they can't help us with. The steam engine. So Claire's gone straight up to Derbyshire. She's got a rendezvous with Boiler Inspector John Glaze. Straight away, he spotted serious problems.
The rivets themselves are awfully tight.
I like that, awfully tired. That's a really good way of saying it's knackered, isn't it?
It is really, yeah.
With Claire in her steamy element, Axel and Jerry's first task is to start restoring the rounding boards that run around the top of the ride. The back of the rounding board is a curved sheet of timber, but it's the beautiful hand-carved decoration screwed to the front that turns this from a bent bit of wood into a work of art.
So you say it was 15 or 16?
And it's these carvings we've got to save by carefully removing them from their rotten backing boards. This is art restoration, not engineering, so hats off to Kevin and Simon for letting Axel and Jerry loose on them. Nails, screws and 90 years of paint mean a combination of grunt and delicacy is required. A bit too much grunt from Axel, and these irreplaceable works of art will be matchwood.
Well, if that happens, we can blame Claire because she's not here.
Oh, that's true.
That's coming. Oh.
Go, go! That's a horrible moment. That'll be off then.
Excellent, Jerry.
Fairground families go back generations and they're a close-knit bunch, so I'm guessing the name J. Edwards from our Gallopers might ring a bell. That's why I've tracked down fairground owner Dave Traylen, because his family have been working the rides for over 100 years. So do you know a lot of the families in this business?
Yes, all of them.
Yeah? You all
Yeah,
get to know each
we
other?
all know each other, yeah.
I wonder if you can help a little bit, because we stripped back the board from the top of the Gallopers and we came up with the name J. Edwards. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that family, would you?
Oh, the Edwardses, they're quite a well-known family as it happens. Jimmy Edwards, he lives at Feltham, where our depot is, just round the corner.
Really?
Yeah, and he's quite a well-known showman.
Feltham it is then. Now that is a result. Could Jimmy Edwards be the J. Edwards on our sign, or his son, or grandson? I could be on the trail of someone who actually worked on our Gallopers, and I've stopped mucking about. The first Gallopers weren't driven by steam at all. Known as Dobbies and driven by sweat and muscle, they were Heath Robinson contraptions with crude wooden horses hanging from simple timber frames. But steam power allowed a much more complicated ride. First out of the gates were the Gallopers, with horses that went up and down as well as round and round. To the Victorians, the newfangled steam fair, with its bright and gaudy paint and high-tech electric lights, soon became the most exciting experience in town. And back at Telford, it's steam that's on Kevin's mind, while he does the daily checks on the electric chaeroplane ride.
A steam engine, in a way, is alive. It's still got a little heart pumping away. It's a warm centre, there's hot water inside it. It's like it's got blood flowing through his veins. It sounds silly, but there is something about a steam engine that gives life to a machine.
But if Kevin knew the state of the boiler, his dream would turn into a nightmare. It's up to Claire's mates Ian and Jack to rescue it. Boiler Inspector John Glaze gives them the lowdown.
Do you want the good news? This is the foundation room, which we can reuse.
Use that again.
Very good.
The bad news is that we need a new front tube plate, a new boiler barrel, major repair to the back head and the throat plate, complete new outer wrapper, new firebox and all new stays, flue tubes, etc.
There's so little left of the boiler, it would be easier to build a new one. But Kevin and Simon want to try and keep everything as original as possible. It's a lot more work.
That'll keep us quiet for 5 minutes.
We'll leave you to it.
Thank you very much.
Sadly, the way our art restorers are carrying on, there ain't going to be much of those priceless carvings either. Careful!
Did I hear deafening crack there? This is going to be a 3-part, I think.
Yeah, it was on by a sliver, unfortunately. Well, we've bust that then, haven't we?
Yeah, I know, it's a shame. I mean, what are we going to do, mate?
I've no idea.
This week's challenge, restoring a 1911 set of steam-powered Gallopers, has been a roller coaster ride. When Claire called in an inspector to check out the steam engine's boiler, it was a write-off.
It's well and truly past its sell-by date.
And when Axel applied his muscles to art restoration, the result was somewhat catastrophic. Now, he's trying to redeem himself. We were going to chuck out the old rounding boards, but Axel reckons that underneath the cheap modern paint job should be the original 1911 sign writing and the colours that we'll need to copy.
I don't want to damage the old sign writing that I'm trying to bring up. So I've got to be really kid gloves here, to be honest.
And beneath the paint, Axel makes a remarkable discovery.
Hey Jerry,
Yeah?
come over here mate, look at this. What do you reckon?
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
He's struck gold. It turns out the original letters weren't painted at all. They're 24-carat gold leaf. It's the key to restoring the ride to its original finery, exactly as old J. Edwards had it. And talking of the great man, acting on a tip-off from Dave the Showman, I'm down in Feltham, West London, to track him down. Now apparently, he lives somewhere in this mobile home park in a long-established community of fairground folk and showmen. Excuse me, you wouldn't know I'd find Mr. Edwards, would you please?
Well, I'm Mr. Edwards.
Oh, you're not Jimmy, are you?
No, I'm not Jimmy. Jimmy lives next door.
Thank you very much. Back and It turns out that J. Edwards was Jimmy's granddad, and the photos took him right back to when he was just a lad.
Yeah, I used to mind it.
Yeah.
I was only 12-year-old.
And there must have been great excitement when they saw you coming over the hill.
Oh, what? Ecstatic. You've never seen nothing like it. Unbelievable.
And back in the old days where there wasn't a lot of colour in people's lives.
No.
Or light.
No. And that did add a bit of colour to it. You know, a little village, you stood silent for a year, we'd roll up and it would be all lit up, there'd be lights and music and...
So what would your day have been? You'd have turned up at a town with the show.
If I start from the beginning, I used to, in the afternoon, light the engine, the steam engine, make sure it had water, and keep looking after the fire until it got steam up, and it was ready.
And a spectacular sight that must have been.
Well, especially with the organ playing and everything, because when you started, you put the organ on and that was it.
So you'd be in the middle as
I'd be in the middle, yeah, and we'd have money takers on the outside taking money.
And then what, a bit of food and bed?
Yeah, a bit of food. You'd make sure the fire was out, right? And that was it.
The Gallopers would really have been the centrepiece.
That's right.
The icing on the cake.
The icing on the cake, yeah, because everybody looked at them and said, they look so beautiful.
With its sparkling gold leaf and steam engine, it must have been a spectacular sight. It was certainly well known. His granddad had already been travelling around the south of England with the Gallopers for years by the time Jimmy was born. And Jimmy remembered one particular story he heard at his grandfather's knee.
My grandfather went to a fete in Booker, right, if you know where that is. That's down in Surrey, right, in 1922. And it was a charities fete. And the Duke of York rode on it. He was there.
Yeah?
Yeah. And we got photos. And
you've got a photograph?
I have a photograph, yeah. You want to see it?
Let's have a look.
I thought you might.
I say.
He's the very man.
Without whom we'd have no Queen today.
Well, there you are.
Riding on the Gallopers.
Riding on the Gallopers at a fete in Booker.
Well, I wonder, Jim, if we can find this horse.
Well, it'd be marvellous if you could. You probably could.
I mean, these were all hand-carved,
They
weren't
was
they?
all hand-carved, yeah.
Presumably all slightly individual.
Individual, yeah. The notes, I don't think there's any two the same. I don't think. They're all different.
The detail.
Yeah.
Well, would you mind if I took this picture, Jim?
You can take it if you want to, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and we shall certainly let you know if we find it. Well, Jimmy's clearly the bloke to tell us if we've restored the Gallopers properly. So, I've got to make sure he comes to see the final result. So you'd be pleased to see it again?
Oh, I would love to see it again. I would.
Hopefully see you again.
Well, I hope I'll see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Best of luck. Thank you very much. Bye.
Right, this is the easy bit, Axel. Taking things apart.
I know that.
And it's exciting bit 'cause you don't know what you're going to find underneath.
If Jimmy could see what's happened to his ride, he'd be horrified. Not only was it converted to electricity, but a bit of nasty 60s kitsch has crept in.
1960s Peterborough look.
These modern mirrors are more than Claire can stand. She wants to get behind them and find out what the original mirrors look like.
This is probably one of the best panels. Look, you can see that star shape.
Underneath is a faint shadow of the original mirror pattern.
So it's cut glass, it's really going to catch the light. That's going to look fantastic.
I'll start calling you Miss Marple.
This is the bit I find most exciting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You start taking things apart, which is the easy bit actually, and then you can't dig away.
And in the workshop, Jerry's had a burst of inspiration about the snapped wooden carvings.
What I'm trying to do is to get the whole thing to pull tight together, so my little wooden wedges can be used to push it absolutely tight against the base.
If his plan works, you won't even see the crack when the glue's dry. Armed with the mirror's measurements and an old photo he's found, Axel's in Bradford to begin the next task. New cut glass mirrors.
We'll work that.
Master mirror maker Eric Holmes is helping him find the right pattern.
Right, Eric. We're after this sort of star pattern.
It looks a bit like a Brunswick star to me.
Yeah?
Yep.
What's a Brunswick star?
Well, it's an elongated star, usually about 32 points to it, like this here. That's similar. That's similar, not just right. No,
That's not it.
No, that's not. That is somewhere near.
Doesn't look as flared, does it?
You can extend this to get the points to suit, so that's okay.
So if it's wrong, we can blame you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the easy bit. For the next step, Eric's handing him over to cutting specialist Mark Wright.
We've got this star, if you can give Axel hand to mark it out.
Mark spent 20 years mastering this rare skill, and he and Axel are going to cut the star shape into a sheet of glass by hand. It's very tricky indeed.
It's the first initial cut that's the worst, because you want any deviations, it will follow that all the time.
Yeah.
It's nice and steady. And off. Looking good.
Ooh, not bad.
Do you feel comfortable at that?
Yeah.
With 2 decades of experience looking over his shoulder, Axel's done a pretty good job of cutting the star into the glass.
Right, mate. Now the polishing part, yeah?
Yep. This is the first process of polishing.
Now he needs to polish the glass into crystal clarity, and that's the trickiest part of the whole job.
But with this we've got to be a bit more careful than we have on the stone, because if you get this too hot you can crack the glass. So it's just a matter of nice and slow and let the wheel do its work again.
Wish me luck.
I'm sure you'll be alright.
So the kind of compound we're using, that we're putting on the roll, what is it?
It's actual pumice powder from volcanoes from Italy.
Why Italy?
Well, obviously because you've got more volcanoes there.
Hi, Axe.
Want to see my newborn baby?
Managed it then?
Yep, look at that.
It's a beautifully cut bit of glass, but it's not a mirror yet.
Yep, it's fine.
It's time for a bit of magic. The spray mixes different chemicals that deposit a layer of real silver, transforming it from a sheet of glass into a perfect replica of a 90-year-old fairground mirror.
Look at that. Oh, doesn't that look nice? Brilliant, mate. Brilliant.
The finished article.
That's right. Never think I could say I've made a mirror.
That's right.
Brilliant.
Back at the fair, as well as lending us a hand, Simon and Kevin still have to make a living. And it's not easy being an Edwardian fairground owner.
It's not even as if it's just a 9-to-5 job. It doesn't work like that. The work starts as soon as you get up in the morning and it virtually ends when you go to bed at night. Living in a workplace, it's a way of life rather than a job. I suppose if we sit down and think about it, we can see it's very different to the way other people live, but we just don't seem to notice it. We just get on with it.
I don't know how they avoid noticing. They don't even have running water. But despite their full-on lifestyle, there's still time to worry about their gallopers.
there are still some major jobs to do, which are quite daunting tasks. It's a nightmare doing the first one, but when you've done one, the other 11 are a great deal easier, I find.
And Kevin has good reason to fret. Up at Alton Engineering, Ian and Jack are still working feverishly to breathe new life into our tired old boiler. Whacking in red-hot rivets by the dozen. Axle star mirrors look wonderful, but they've still got to go back on. And Jerry's saved wood carvings are back on the board, but they still need a lot of attention.
Nice to see the rounding boards finished. It's quite hard work trying to save all the mouldings. And Simon made us a lovely backboard because our last one totally disintegrated.
It's frustrating. Until we put it all together, nothing's going to look finished. So, what's the squad's solution? A nice cup of tea.
Here comes trouble.
Right, gang?
We have been working.
I'll bet, I promise. Well, I think I've got something rather interesting to show you here. Jim Edwards, the grandson of the original owner of the Gallopers, gave me this photograph, and in which you can see the future King of England, George VI, the Queen's father, riding on one of the horses.
Nice one. Are you sure it's ours though?
It is, it is.
And that's definitely from our Gallopers?
It's definitely from our Gallopers. He wrote a letter, which unfortunately has gone missing, thanking them very much for a very enjoyable ride. So, I think, and I'm sure he was talking about the carousel.
Well, we've got to find the horse.
Yeah, we've got to find the horse, haven't we? Well, I've noticed that one of the teeth on the top there's a lot shorter than the others. I think that's a feature. Well, what do you think, Jerry? I think you and I should go and have a look, see if we can find it.
It's worth a chance, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go for it.
Go for it.
Nice one.
Get your back in there.
All right, mate.
And we'll see you later.
Right, horse with a chipped tooth.
Well, I've noticed that the Salvage squad are up in Shropshire trying to restore a 1911 steam-powered Gallopers ride. I've discovered that George VI, the Queen's father, once rode on our Gallopers. The horses have been repainted many times since, but I've spotted that this one had a broken tooth, and that might help us pick her out of a lineup.
Never look a gift horse in the mouth, eh?
You are funny, Jerry. You really are. You're a funny guy. It's not that one. Teeth. Hold on. I think even though that's covered in a lot of paint, I think that is the shorter tooth.
He's got a gappy smile.
Yes.
There's a lot of paint on it, but I think that is the one with the gap in his tooth.
Well, you've got a name for it, haven't you?
Yes, they're all individually named, and our one, the one the King rode on, was called Senora, or Senhora.
Well, let's get the sandpaper out then and go back through some of the layers. Yeah?
Go on.
Bound to find it.
When George VI rode her, she was called Senora. If this is the horse, somewhere under 80 years of paint, Claire should find the original name. It is.
Go Claire, that's it.
Yes, it's coming through, it is. Yep, this is our horse.
Yes.
It is.
Good. Good work there.
What are we going to do? I mean, I know you've really got a lot of work on.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to restore the horses, but I think this one's a special case. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we will restore it.
I think we should.
No, we should. It's a three-word thing there.
It's the royal we.
Got to be done.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
It's a bit of history, isn't it?
Kevin and Simon are expecting the ride to join their fair in a couple of weeks and start earning its keep. And restoring Senora's finery will be a big job, but Jerry's keen to have a crack at it.
This one hasn't.
Can you imagine we get it back to the condition it was when the King was riding it? So that leaves Axel on his Todd, copying the gold leaf sign writing for the top of the ride. So, like any grown man confronted with a big job, he's got out the powder puff. What you doing, Axel?
You've been an art student and all, you should really, really know, shouldn't you? Ask the man, he'll tell you.
What's going on, Kevin?
He's applying what they call pounce. It's a very fine chalk. Then you put the size on, which is like a thin varnish.
So this powder will stop the gold leaf spreading anywhere other than on the letters?
Yeah, it's a barrier, it'll stop it sticking on there. This is the original board that Axel stripped down. This is the original lettering that went on it when it was new.
They're not only beautiful, they're quite interesting what they say, aren't they? All classes, this one is. Do you think that refers to the fact that poor people couldn't go on some rides?
I think anybody who had the money could go on it, that's why it was all classes, they'd let anybody on.
And I like this one over here, clean and healthy. What was it, clean and healthy?
Clean and healthy entertainment. They wanted to be respectable because the fairgrounds were thought of as fairly disreputable places. So
I was going to say, what's the opposite of clean and healthy?
Disreputable, basically.
Kevin's left us to paint the gluey size on the letters for the gold leaf to stick to. Brave man. What do you reckon's easier, straight or curved?
I think they're just as bad as each other, really.
At 4/millionths of an inch thick, the gold leaf is thinner than human hair, so it comes on backing paper. Just carefully lay it on and rub it in. With a bit more work, that real gold's going to look fabulous. There's more good news up in Derbyshire. Ian and Jack have finished the boiler. Though the boiler was knackered, the engine that sits on top of it wasn't in bad shape. Now all Claire's got to do is put it all back together.
It's looking fantastic. It really is. Are you pleased with it?
Yeah, we've had 5 minutes on it.
It's had a lot longer than that. That's a little engine, little boiler, but so much work.
Yeah, there's just as much as on a big engine, really.
Without the engine, the whole restoration's nothing more than a pile of interesting bits. The steam engine itself is bolted on top of the boiler and drives the whole ride. At its heart is a circular piston. This is a close fit in a tube of metal called the cylinder. Steam is alternately let into one end of the piston and then the other, pushing it back and forth. A bar with a hinge on it connects the piston to the crankshaft. As the piston races backwards and forwards, it pushes the crank round and round. Finally, a wheel on the end of the crank drives the ride. Just the last 2 clamps that hold the crankshaft in place, and it should be ready to roll for the first time in 20 years.
Hey!
As snug as a bug getting a rug.
Well, it all looks fantastic, but it still hasn't run, and we won't know if it'll do the job until we get it back on the ride. But Claire loves it anyway.
All in all, it's just such a nice thing. I just want to take it home, really. It's really rather good. But I can't, because this is what's going to make this Gallopers ride just right.
After a bout of lightning stripping, Jerry and his new best friend have headed up to the Welsh Hills. With time short, he's pressed expert carver Ian Cruikshank into helping him out. After 90 years, rot has crept in all over the horse. The legs have been patched on with old nails and bits of tin. Underneath, it's a tale of rot and decay. To repair her, all the rotten wood needs to be cut away and replaced, ready for recarving.
Ian, we've got this chunk of wood in here, essentially replacing all the rotten stuff, so it's now nice and solid here. How do we make this look like it's part of that?
Here's a chisel, nice curved chisel. Don't go in too deep, just try and get a feel for taking a little bit off.
Right, okay.
I'll stop you. If you
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Ian's been carving for 20 years. But this is Salvage Squad, so after 30 seconds of instruction, Jerry sets to on our irreplaceable horse.
So has that got that bit?
I think so. Have a feel at it.
Yeah, no, that feels fine.
The main's much more tricky. He's got to follow exactly the 90-year-old lines of the original carver.
Right, go up, up.
One slip now, and it's sayonara, sayonara. But Jerry's confidence is growing by the second.
I don't believe this. I'm carving the king's horse, for heaven's sake.
It's all go now, and Axel and I are busy putting his beautiful mirrors back on the ride.
Lovely. You can really see how it's going to look. Yeah.
Can you get 3 on it?
Let's have that start. Especially when it starts going right low.
With only a few days to go before the grand opening, the pressure's really on. Jerry's back with the horse, but it's only just getting its first lick of paint.
Yep, that is going to look fantastic when it's finished.
We've got the rounding boards rebuilt, but not all the decorations complete. The steam engine's on its way back from Derbyshire, but we still don't know if it works. In fact, the only job that's completely finished are Axel's mirrors. Worse still, with time running out, Simon and Axel are still finding loads of bits and bobs in need of attention.
Cool. Excellent. Well done.
Right. One down.
But with Kevin's expert help, at least Sonora's finally beginning to look like a fairground horse again. Jerry's ecstatic with the results.
This really looks, it's a different animal now, isn't it? Now it's painted.
Yeah, it's brought it to life. It works very well. The way this carving here flows round the horse, and on the front, the way it goes around that way, it's beautifully done.
The quality of the original carver's work just shines through.
So what you're telling me is that this is the best fairground horse you perhaps ever like to find?
In my opinion, it's one of the best. It's tasteful.
.24 karat gold sets off Jerry's paint beautifully.
Wow.
And finally, it's time for Jerry to give her name back once more, just as it was when George VI sat on her 80 years ago. It's all too much for Jerry.
Go have a rest now. Go have a lie down.
With a bit of luck, she's about to become a working horse once more, because it's time for the hardest task of all, putting the whole ride back together again. The Salvage squad are up in Shropshire restoring a 1911 steam-powered Galloper ride. After weeks of toil, we're finally ready for the biggest task of all, building it back up. Well, everyone's been working their socks off, but I have to admit, I'm not sure that we've got everything completely finished. And I'm hoping we haven't missed anything really important, because today is the day, come hell or high water, that Gallopers is going up. And it'll be the first time Kevin and Simon have ever seen it run on steam. Claire's engine is back where it belongs, on the centre of the truck. And doesn't it look great? After weeks of working on all the fiddly bits and pieces, we're desperate to complete the final task and put this baby together. But without Simon and Kevin's expert guidance, we'd be here for months. And she's got to be up and running when the fair opens at 11 AM tomorrow. Right then, it's all here. Where do we start, Kev?
Well, first off, we've got to get the gantry out, which is what the centre sits on. Get the gantry set, get it level, then run the centre up onto the gantry.
It's finally time to see if this jigsaw of bits actually makes a galloper. With the base level, the centre truck, complete with axles mirrors, is hauled up and locked down. Now with any luck, we should be seeing the erection of the chimney. And remember, every single part of the ride is going to hang from this spindly looking funnel. Our ride was designed to be put together by no more than 2 or 3 blokes. So, it's no accident that the roof of the travelling van is exactly the right height to fit the top of the ride. It's not just a roof, it's a working platform. Now we can begin hanging the whole ride from the central chimney. And you don't walk around the ride to fit bits, you just turn the whole ride and the next job comes to you. And as the top frame is built up for the first time, you can see the outline of her shape.
The world's strongest man! Which is over there.
So Kevin, what have I got here, mate?
They're the cranks. The cranks, these are the bits that make the horses go up and down. As the ride turns round, that's connected to the cogs in the centre, and as that turns, with it having the different throws on the crank, that makes the horses go up and down.
The crank is a wobbly shaped bar of metal. As the ride goes round, the crank rotates. The horses hang from the step part of the crank, and as the crank rotates, the horses gallop up and down. And of course, there are 12 cranks. Isn't that a beautifully simple bit of engineering?
Brilliant,
yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah. These beautiful poles simply hook onto the top of the frame. But these aren't for the horses. When we've finished, the whole floor of the ride will hang from them.
Yeah, he's got the measure of us there.
With the basic frame in place, it's time for some colour.
Start taking it round that.
First the squad get lost in the canvas top. And with that in place, Simon pops on the top of the chimney. Now it's the piece de résistance, the 12 rounding boards. And don't they look sensational? As the rounding boards go on, the ride's transformed. There's one man I really want to see all this. My old mate, Jimmy Edwards.
Jimmy Edwards, the grandfather of the chap I met, Jimmy Edwards. I think he's going to be very surprised to see his family name still up there.
Because he's coming up tomorrow to give us his opinion on our restoration. This is more like it. Fitting headless chickens is clearly a salvage squad job.
It'd be nice to get these done before nightfall. It would really, wouldn't it?
But it's not the poultry the punters pay for, it's the GGs. Every one of the 22 horses has its own name and its own unique look. But there's one very special horse that needs to join its mates on the ride.
Bring her out! Jerry's horse! Jerry's horse! Bring the horse out!
Your Majesties, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I give you Sonora! Look at that!
Beautiful.
Look at that!
That's the real thing.
Come on then, put it on.
Get on. Up she goes.
Yes!
Yeah, look at that. The only thing is, how are the little kiddies going to get up onto those? Or were they very tall in those days?
They were very tall in those days.
I'm sorry to say, it's platforms time.
It's just the 12 platforms to go on. And, yes, you guessed it, 12 sets of steps. 10 hours of hard graft, and we're almost there. Well, as has become apparent to all of us, the light is fading very fast now, and we've still got a hell of a lot to do. So, as we've got no access to electricity, I suggest we're going to have to stop tonight and start again tomorrow morning.
Good plan.
Yeah. But it's going to have to be early, obviously, because we're going to have to get the flaming thing finished before the fair opens.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go home.
Come on. Today's the day of the fair, And if we've done our jobs right, our Gallopers should run for the first time in 20 years. It's a lovely morning, but unfortunately we have absolutely loads and loads to do, and the fair opens at 10 o'clock.
But that looks good.
Hey, that's not all bad.
Lovely, eh?
Yeah. Who built that? Must have been brilliant then, Pete. Well, that's fantastic. But if we want it to happen, we'd better roll up our sleeves and finish off the jobs we didn't do yesterday.
You put these fingerprints on my mirror.
The boiler's been completely rebuilt, but our steam engine still hasn't run in anger. Claire's itching to try it out, so Jack Meeker, who restored it, has come down to show her the ropes.
Top of the firebox is covered, so then it's all safe and we can set fire to it.
Right, look up at that canopy, that new tilt, because it's never ever going to be that clean ever again once we set fire to the boiler. When was the last time this thing was in steam?
It's going to be 20 years, isn't it?
This doesn't look too good. There's smoke pouring out everywhere. Is all our work about to turn into very expensive firewood? But Claire and Jack are still piling on the kindling. And Simon's getting quite concerned. Hey Simon, that chimney's effective, isn't it, eh?
It's not really doing its job at the moment, is it?
And Kevin? Well, Jack and Claire are trying to calm his nerves.
As soon as the pole gets warm, it will lift the smoke.
Come on, there's a wisp of smoke coming from that chimney.
Yeah, but that's what's going up through the centre of the ride and coming out of the hole in the top of the tilt and then going up the chimney.
I know, it's all coming out from underneath and...
Yeah, there's more coming out from underneath than there is out of the chimney.
The punters are arriving, but our ride's still lost in the smog. Well, it's 11:05 and the fair's open and there are people milling about and the organs are firing up. But we're not just yet. But we will. Oh yes, we will. And at least the smoke's clearing. Now the chimney's nice and hot and is finally drawing away all the filthy smoke from the ride. And just in time too. It's Jimmy Edwards, up from London to see what we've done to his old granddad's ride.
Yeah, marvellous.
So that'd have been you as a 12-year-old on the old boiler there?
On the engine, yeah. Going up
Come
there.
on, have a look, yeah. He hasn't seen it for 50 years.
God almighty.
You've skipped up there before now.
Not many. God almighty.
Jimmy, did you ever think you'd be riding on this again?
Never in a million years. I never was here again. Ever. Because you've got to remember everything looks smaller now, because I was only a young boy at the time.
Yeah. Do you remember the last time you saw it?
Yeah, in a field.
How long did it actually take you to put these together?
How long?
Yeah.
About half a day.
I think we've done it in the concert.
Yeah, we could have done with you yesterday. Steam's up, it looks great, Jimmy approves, but this is the moment of truth for Simon and Kevin.
Come on,
yeah, we go! Hey, hey, hey! That's grand, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Woo-ha! You know
Axel! Yes!
It's beautiful. For the first time in 20 years, the horses are prancing again, and the whole thing's working perfectly.
I'll go around all day.
Simon is overwhelmed, and Jimmy just can't wait to get back on.
Hold on, give some money, you.
You're all getting old. Look at this. He's on while the ride's moving and he's asking for cash. Once a showman, always a showman, eh?
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Brilliant.
How did it feel when it started?
Amazing. Yeah. Brilliant again.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it though?
Beating away in the middle.
It is like a living organ, yeah, fantastic. So, that pile of old poles and wood really did make a fantastic Gallopers ride. It looks the part alright, but a keen showman's eye will tell you that there's something missing from our ride. Punters! While we dress for the part, Kevin and Simon finally take control of their ride for the first time.
Roll up! Don't be shy, roll up! You name it!
All the hard work to make it so gloriously eye-catching has paid off.
Right, kids, hold on, lock your track. We're nice and fast right. All classes welcome! Come on then, go up you get.
As happy fairgoers swarm to our ride like bees to a honeypot. Exactly what Kevin and Simon wanted.
Let's ride!